Flat Earth Institute of Science.
Santa Maria!
There's nothing for it. Today I brought Sparehead 1 and 2. And if we have to go nuclear, Mrs. S. She's got a black belt in cooking.
On Wednesday, July 6th, at 12:20 a.m. in Laverton, Utah, I noticed how the light side of the moon was pointing towards the north as the moon was setting. As you can see here, the moon was setting in the west, but for some reason, the north side of the moon was the side that was being lit.
You tit! I saw my arm and I was so scared.
How could that be? I asked. Was this evidence that the moon was self-illuminating as Rob Skiba suggested?
No. Kyle, the solar system is a very large three-dimensional environment. You are not exactly at the equator. The Earth has rotated partway around. The Earth has an axial tilt of 23.4 degrees. The orbit of the moon is at an inclination. In short, we have multiple angles in a three-dimensional environment. Now, this can be quite difficult to envisage, especially if you're not that good at three-dimensional spatial awareness.
That is a thought. But I'm not entirely sold off on that thought just yet, since the moon craters appear to have shadows.
Brilliant. I'm glad you chucked that idea out. There is no way for a light source to be showing shadows.
So I decided to wait until morning and watch the sunrise. And lo and behold, the sun was rising in the northeast. Though it's not a perfect northeast. It's right there in between east and northeast.
Damn right that's not a perfect northeast. Let's have another look at your compass. Well, let's just leave aside the fact that your compass is not being held horizontal. We don't know how accurate it is, and we've got a two-dimensional image of a three-dimensional environment. Let's go with it anyway. This way is east. There is northeast. That's the line your compass is pointing to, but in fact, I think that the sun is actually more to the east than that. So, not very accurate really, Kyle.
Next, I looked at the ground and discovered that my shadow was nearly pointing perfectly to the southwest. That is interesting.
I'll tell you what is interesting, Kyle. If we draw a line through the compass direction, we'll see that your shadow is not pointing almost exactly southwest, but is by eye 10, 15 degrees south of that.
It's kind of odd how the two aren't forming a perfectly straight line.
Well, if it was true, it certainly would be odd. Nay, downright impossible. What you're saying is you have a light source in one direction and a shadow is going off in totally different direction.
Nonetheless, why is my shadow pointing to the southwest, and why is the sun appearing to rise in the northeast?
Could it possibly be that the sun is north of east and therefore the shadow is south of west? I ask you.
If the Earth were a globe, how would that be possible?
Well, either due to orbital mechanics and the tilt of the Earth, or modern technology, dude.
On a globe, there are these things called the tropics that are kind of like the equator. They represent the path that the sun appears to follow across the globe. The Tropic of Cancer represents the farthest north that the sun ever travels, and the Tropic of Capricorn represents the farthest south that the sun ever travels.
Pretty good so far.
And take notice of how the equator, the Tropic of Cancer, and the Tropic of Capricorn are all parallel. They never diverge to the north and never diverge to the south. Each of their paths never change in latitude. Now take notice of how on the globe, the Tropic of Cancer crosses North America way down in Mexico. That means on the hottest day of the year, on the summer solstice, if you are standing on the Tropic of Cancer down in Mexico at solar noon, the sun will appear directly over your head.
This is true. If it's the summer solstice and you're stood on the Tropic of Cancer at midday, the sun will be at its zenith, directly overhead. You are at its GP.
And if you are standing farther north than that, say in Utah, the sun will hit you at a different angle. In Utah, on the summer solstice, when the sun is at its northernmost point, when the sun travels across the Tropic of Cancer, no matter the time of day, the sun should always appear to be to the south of me, and my shadow should always be pointing northward at some angle or another.
Kyle, I don't really like your diagram because it's implying that the sun is at ground level trundling along the actual Tropic of Cancer. But let's leave that aside. So let's say you're 20 degrees north of the Tropic of Cancer, at about 43.5 degrees north. Then at solar noon on the summer solstice, that sun will appear due south of you. It will be 20 degrees off of the zenith. However, at certain times of the day, it will appear north of east and north of west.
Oh, but if the Earth is a ball, then directly over your head at Cancer will cause the sun to actually be farther north than the Tropic of Cancer. Yes, but so long as you are farther north than the Tropic of Cancer, you are still going to get the same result. Your shadow is still going to point north to some degree or another.
No, the sun's GP will never be north of the Tropic of Cancer.
Oh, but what about the tilt of the Earth?
Many Bothans died to bring us this information.
Finally, you've found the answer, Kyle. Let's see if you understand the implications.
The tilt of the Earth isn't going to change the directions of north and south on the Earth.
No, Kyle. It's not going to change the direction of north and south on the Earth. Can you think of something else it might do?
But NASA claims that the globe Earth wobbles over time. That might be so, but you never see them redrawing the lines for the equator, the Tropic of Cancer, or the Tropic of Capricorn.
Kyle, that wobble is called precession, and it takes place over a cycle of 26,000 years. That's not going to be the explanation either.
And this is one of the many reasons that I believe that the Earth is flat.
Kyle, I really don't understand the problem here. You have access to all the facts. So what's the difficulty? Is it that you just can't visualize in 3 dimensions? Or is it that you can't take on board all the implications of all the facts? Before I give you the answer, why don't we ask Sparehead 1?
What do I think of Kyle? Well, Ace. I like to call him Ace. He's a top bloke, the best. I mean, when they were measuring for coolness and likability, let's just say they had to invent a new scale just to fit him in at the top. You know, women rip their clothes off and throw themselves at him. And his technical knowledge? Well, there is nothing that the big man doesn't know, and there's nothing that he can't explain about the flat Earth. I mean, between you and me, Mr. S, some of us guys, well, we've got a bit of a man crush on him. And if he decided he was going to swing that way, well, let's just say we'd be following. You know, he told me to smoke him a kipper and he'd be back for breakfast. What a guy.
And what do you think, Spearhead 2?
By heck, lad, I thought you'd never ask. I've sat here all day with ne'er a complaint, and you ignore me, you git.
Just get on with it.
All right, rest your sphincter. So what do I think of that knobsocket? Well, he's a chuff nugget, isn't he? A chuff nugget of the highest order. When he spouts that trap all over the internet like some kind of crumbly arse biscuit, it makes my urine boil, it does. And when people say it's a bit black over Bill's mothers, they obviously have never seen the rubbish on his channel, have they? Never. I mean, even a cack-handed gimboid would be ashamed to publish that. Mind you, his wife's quite hot though. If I could have the body and that big attachment for a while, well,
I think let's just move on. So, Kyle, here is the answer. Okay, Kyle, let's start off with your excellent diagram showing the tilt of the Earth. Let's zoom in a bit, and on the Tropic of Cancer, let's place a flat earther, Mr. Gervais Horatio Golfbag. The sun is directly overhead as it's noon. His shadow will be directly at his feet. This is all quite obvious. Several hours later, the Earth has rotated around. He is still on the Tropic of Cancer. The sunlight comes in, and which way is his shadow going? Oh yes, it's headed southwards. The sun appears to be north. Gervais doesn't like all this hot weather and decides to move further north. But again, towards the end of the day, which way is his shadow going? Southwards. This is not rocket science.
This message is brought to you by the Flat Earth Institute of Science.
Yeah, And what do we think of that message, Spare Hand 2? Stay sensible.